Taking a look at the two different designations, we're going to stick with two here. One being the human being, the other being the person. Now the human being, it has rights that are available to it. Rights that it can operate on, rights that it can claim. And the human being, I would contend, also has obligations. Now these obligations would be to his fellow man, not to a commercial system. Now can we force a human being to take the obligations that they have towards the fellow man? Not really. Some people, for example, are religious. Whether they follow Islam or they follow Christianity or they follow Buddhism, it doesn't matter. But they follow a religion, and in that religion it teaches them that they have obligations towards their fellow man. For Christianity, it would be treat others as you want to be treated, you know, love others and give to others. So those would be the obligations that they would say are upon them to exercise towards their fellow man. But you don't find these obligations expressed in any type of commercial law or enactments, if you will. Now the person, it's very different. That artificial being that's been created by law and that's been attached to the human being, that person has duties. It can operate duties, and it can operate under obligations, and it operates under privileges. Those are the functions of the person. So while we have a man, a human being who can operate or claim rights, we have the person that has duties, obligation, and privilege. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 16. Everyone shall have the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. This is a right you can exercise, you have no obligation. Article 8 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. No one shall be held in servitude. That is a right you can stand under. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 17. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary or unlawful interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence. So, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary or unlawful interference. This is a right you can claim as a human being. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 22. Everyone shall have the right of freedom of association. You can associate with those who you decide to. You have no obligation to associate with anyone who tries to force you to, including the government bodies, the state parties. This is a right a human being has attached to it or recognized for it. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, Article 11. The state parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone to an adequate standard of living for himself and his family, including adequate food, clothing, and housing, and to the continuous improvement of living conditions. This is a right you can claim. This is a right you can exercise and hold your state party obligated to you individually. As a human being, a man, I can exercise rights. They are there for me to exercise. Now, that doesn't create an obligation. Just because these rights are present and available for me to use and to operate under, it doesn't mean that I have to, and doesn't necessarily mean that I will. First of all, if I don't know that those rights are available for me, I will never seek after them and I will never operate under them. And secondarily, if I do know that those rights are there, perhaps I won't want to use them. But nevertheless, we have to be aware of our rights, and we have to know where they come from. We have to make that distinction. Now, we also, these rights that we have, or these rights that we understand, there has to be someone who recognizes them. They have to recognize these rights. Otherwise, whatever I'm claiming, whatever I'm stating, just goes into the air, and that means absolutely nothing. So the human being has rights that are recognized. They are recognized. And these rights can be found in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Declaration of Rights and Responsibilities of Individuals, among other international obligations or international covenants that are in existence. Now, we, as human beings, we can draw from these covenants our rights that are enumerated in there. However, we don't have the obligation, but we can. And the state parties that have signed or are signatories to these covenants that are contractually liable or legal obligation upon these covenants will have to recognize our rights and our claims when we draw them from these. Here are several rights that a human being can exercise according to those covenants. You have the right to recognition as a person. You can enter into recognition as a person. So you, the human being, can decide that you will play the role or enter into recognition as a person. You, as a human being, you have the right to association. So you can choose who you want to associate with, no matter who it is. You, as a human being, you have the right not to be held in servitude. Not to be held in servitude. So, for example, if the government wants to force you to be that Canadian citizen, to take that recognition, you have a right as a human being not to be held in that servitude. Now, you also have a right as a human being, if you want, to partake in the government. So you see, here they're giving you two expressions. One, they can't hold you, but one, if you choose to, you can. Now, as a human being, you also have the right to food. These are rights that are recognized internationally and domestically. These are rights that you can claim as a human being. You have the right to food, to clothing, to housing, and to the continued improvement of your living condition year after year. Now these, again, are all rights that have been recognized on behalf of the human being. And they are there for you to exercise. That person, the artificial being that has been created by law and attached to the human being, well, it has a duty. Actually, it has many duties, many duties. But just to show you the difference, some of the duties that this person has, or this artificial being has, is to pay taxes. It has no choice. And the person has to obey the enactments. Has no choice. And that person is held in association with Her Majesty as a subject or servant of Her Majesty. And that person has to pursue or earn a living for itself. That person also has privileges attached to it. Privileges. So it has to pay for any benefits that it will receive. For example, if it wants to have fishing, the right to do fishing, well, it will have to pay for that privilege through the form of a permit. A permit. That's what a person's accountability is. And if they want to, for example, travel, should be driving in a car, well, they're under obligation to pay for that privilege and to get a permit to do that. If a person wants to hunt, the same thing happens. They're under obligation to get a permit. Now, all these actions, fishing, traveling, hunting, they're all meant as titled or a benefit for you, or a privilege that you can operate as a person. It's not a right. They don't say you have a right to hunt. They don't say you have a right, for example, to travel. They don't say you have a right to fish. That's not what they're saying. If it was a right, you could use it. You wouldn't owe anybody anything for it. However, they term it, they designate these actions as privileges. And therefore, you have to pay as the person to exercise these privileges. So they make you pay money for it. Now, also as a person, you have to work to earn or pursue a living. That's your obligation. And within that, they say that that's a privilege for you to do that. So this state party, they try to remove all your rights, or they try to hide all your rights that you have available to you as a human being. And they try to get you to focus or operate under the designation of a person. Therefore, you are become a profitable instrument for them of money. Because everything that you have to do, or everything that you will exercise as a privilege, is going to cost you money. And it grows their banks. And then they place massive amounts of duties on you that also increases their banks.